My name is Megan Kimball. I'm 32 years old, and I deliver other people's babies for a living. One September afternoon, in my mother's kitchen drawer, I found a psychiatric file with my name on it, written by a doctor I have never once been a patient of. 3 sessions, dated and signed. Sessions that never happened. My mother is obsessed with grandchildren. I knew that. Everyone in our family knew that. I had no idea how far she and that doctor were willing to go to turn my body into her legacy. And believe me, the file in that drawer was only her opening move. There was a police knock at my door at 11 at night. There was a letter to my hospital. There was a courtroom. And there was my sister, standing in the middle of it all, holding a secret that went back 4 years. What I finally did when I understood the whole plan, that part, nobody in my family saw coming. Least of all my mother. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, the channel where women tell the family stories they lived through, quietly and all the way to the end. If stories like this one find you at the right moment, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe, because you'll want to hear how this ends. Let me back up. I work nights on the labor and delivery floor at Riverside Medical Center outside Columbus, Ohio. 6 years on that unit. I like the night shift. Babies don't check the clock, and neither do I. I had a 1-bedroom apartment 15 minutes from my mother's house, a coffee maker older than some of my coworkers, and a savings account with $41,000 in it, my down payment fund. I'd already picked the house out. 2 bedrooms, a maple tree, a porch just wide enough for one good chair. My dad, Gary, died 2 years ago. Heart attack at 62, in the driveway, holding a bag of birdseed. After the funeral, somebody had to keep my mother's life running, and in our family, somebody has always meant me. I sorted her pension paperwork. I set up her pill organizer every Sunday like I was stocking a med cart. I drove her to church when her hands shook too much for the wheel, and I kept a key to her house on my ring, right next to my own. My older sister Jessica loved Mom just as much, but Jessica had her own full-time job, trying to get pregnant. So the managing fell to me, and I was good at it. I'm a nurse. Managing is the whole job. If Mom spiraled, I talked her down. If Mom offended somebody at church, I smoothed it over. If Mom cried at midnight, I answered on the second ring. Back then, I called it being a good daughter. I know a better word for it now, but we'll get there. First, you need to see what Sunday dinner looked like at Patricia Kimball's table. Every Sunday, my mother set 4 places and talked about a 5th that didn't exist. There is a cabinet in her hallway, and inside that cabinet are baby things. Knitted booties, a christening gown, ironed, a silver rattle she bought the year Jessica got married. She dusted that cabinet weekly, the way other widows tend a grave. Jessica and her husband Tyler had been trying for 4 years. 3 full rounds of IVF at about $18,000 apiece. $54,000 total, and $38,000 of it came straight out of Mom's retirement. Mom didn't offer that money. She insisted on it, and then she mentioned it, warmly, at every holiday. 2 of those rounds ended in miscarriage. I held my sister's hair in a clinic bathroom after the second one. Mom's response, both times, was to book the next appointment before Jessica had even stopped bleeding. Last winter, at Sunday dinner, Mom announced the count like a weather report. 3 embryos left, she said, passing the green beans. 3 chances. Jessica stared at her plate. I watched my sister glance sideways before answering any question about her own treatment. And I realized she wasn't checking with Tyler. She was checking with Mom. Then Mom turned to me. She asked, sweet as pie, when I plan to stop wasting my good years on other women's babies. I said what I always said. Maybe never, and I'm at peace with that. The table went quiet. My mother set down her fork, looked at me the way you look at a broken appliance, and said, "You don't get to be the end of this family." I laughed it off that night. I want you to remember that sentence, though. She meant it as a rule. In March, the 4th transfer failed. I drove Jessica to the follow-up because Tyler couldn't get off work, and Mom met us there, uninvited, with a notebook. The doctor was kind and she was clear. Jessica's endometriosis had progressed. Between the scarring, the 2 miscarriages, and a hemorrhage scare during the last cycle, another pregnancy wouldn't just be unlikely, it would be dangerous. Not a coin flip, she said. A cliff. She recommended gently that Jessica stop trying to carry. My sister was 35 years old and she sat in that office like a woman being read a verdict, hands folded, nodding at the correct moments. She didn't ask a single question. My mother asked one. She leaned forward, pen ready, and said, "But the embryos are still viable?" The doctor blinked. "Yes," she said slowly. "The 2 frozen embryos remained viable." Mom wrote that down. Underlined it. I watched her do it, and something in the back of my neck went cold, the way it does at work when a monitor starts a rhythm you don't like. In the parking lot, Jessica hugged me too hard and said she was fine, which is what she says when she's the opposite of fine. Mom walked me to my car. She took my hand in both of hers, and her palms were warm, and her voice was full of tenderness, and she said, "God kept you healthy for a reason, Megan." I told myself she was grieving the grandchild she'd already named in her head. I told myself it was a strange thing said on a sad day. I'm a good nurse. I can read a chart from across the room. But I misread my own mother for 2 more weeks. 2 weeks later, Mom invited Jessica and me over for what she called a girls' dinner. Tyler was not invited. That should have been my first clue, because Mom adores Tyler the way you adore a reliable appliance. There was a pot roast, and there were candles, and next to my plate, where a napkin should be, there was a glossy folder from a fertility clinic in Columbus. Gestational surrogacy, the cover said. A gift of family. Mom served the roast and then she served the plan, in the same easy voice she used for both. Jessica's 2 embryos needed a womb. I had one, young and healthy, and, in her words, just sitting there. The clinic did consultations on Thursdays. She'd already checked which Thursdays I wasn't on shift. She'd gotten my schedule from Jessica. 9 months, she said. 9 months. And this family lives forever. I looked at my sister. Jessica was studying her plate like it held instructions. Shoulders curved in. Silent. Not embarrassed silent. Trained silent. I put my fork down and I kept my voice level, the one I use at work at 3 in the morning, and I said no. I said I loved Jessica. I said I would drive to every appointment, research every adoption agency, help screen a professional surrogate if that's what Jessica and Tyler chose. Jessica and Tyler, I said, not anyone else. But I would not be pregnant for this family. Mom didn't argue. That's the part people never believe. She smiled, squared the folder's edges like a woman closing a hymnal, and said, "You'll come around, honey. You're the strong one." Then she asked who wanted pie. I drove home that night with my hands too tight on the wheel, and I couldn't have told you why. What came next wasn't an argument, it was weather. A front of it, moving in slow. At church, women I barely knew began squeezing my arm and saying they were praying for my big decision. Mrs. Hollis from the flower committee told me, misty-eyed, that what I was doing for my sister was beautiful. I hadn't agreed to do anything for my sister. Somebody had told these women I had. My Aunt Carol called on a Tuesday and read me an actual devotional about sacrifice, and when I asked her to stop, she said, "Your mother is not asking for the moon, Megan. She's asking for life." Mom herself worked the oldest seam in the family mine. Your father, she'd say, died waiting for a grandchild. He'd be alive today if he'd had one to live for. A sentence that is medically insane and emotionally radioactive, and she deployed it over meatloaf. And here's my confession. I managed it. All of it. I apologized to Jessica for the tension. I called Aunt Carol back to keep the peace. I still did Mom's pill organizer every Sunday. Still drove her to church, because I really believed, that if I just absorbed enough of the pressure, the family would hold together until Mom wore herself out. That was my actual plan. Be the shock absorber. Outlast her. Then, near the end of April, the pushing simply stopped. No brochures, no scripture, no dead father guilt. Mom went pleasant, asked about my shifts, sent me home with soup, told Mrs. Hollis to mind her knitting, 2 full weeks of pleasant. I should have been relieved, and instead I lay awake in my apartment doing the math nurses do. When a patient in pain suddenly goes quiet, you don't relax. You check what's wrong. The answer arrived at Sunday dinner wearing a cardigan. Dr. Raymond Whitfield, 68, a psychiatrist from our church, semi-retired but, as Mom announced with strange pride, still fully licensed. He'd known our family 20 years, mostly from potlucks. Now, suddenly, he was at the table every single week, sitting in my father's chair, carving the roast with my father's knife. And he was so very interested in me. How was I sleeping, with those brutal night shifts? Did I find myself more irritable since Dad passed? He'd read that grief can hide in busy women. It comes out sideways, he said, in anger, in withdrawal, in big rash decisions. He said that last part looking right at me, kindly, the way you'd look at a dog that might bite. My mother watched these little check-ins with her hands folded, glowing. Here is what I want you to understand. I noticed. I'm not going to play the fool for this story, because I wasn't one. A stranger asking screening questions across a pot roast has a rhythm to it, and I work in a hospital. I know an assessment when I'm inside one. So that night I went home and started a journal. Plain spiral notebook. Date, time, who was present, what was said, word for word where I could manage it. May 18th, Whitfield asked whether I'd ever felt the family would be better off without my anger in it. May 25th, Mom described me to Mrs. Hollis as struggling since Gary died, while I stood 10 feet away, visibly not struggling. I wrote it all down and I still couldn't see the shape of it. I thought I was documenting rudeness. I was documenting the foundation being poured for something much bigger. I need to pause and show you the board the way I saw it, because the stakes here weren't abstract. My license and the career behind it took every year since I was 18. Nursing school, the brutal early stretch on a med-surg floor that nobody warns you about, then 6 good years in labor and delivery. Every renewal cycle, the board asks about conditions that could impair your ability to practice safely. Nurses answer those questions under penalty of losing everything. A psychiatric record doesn't have to be true to be expensive. It just has to exist and demand explaining. Then there was the money. That $41,000 down payment fund was 10 years of picked-up shifts and skipped vacations, and it was maybe 6 months from becoming a set of house keys. A guardianship fight, though I didn't yet know to call it that, burns exactly 2 kinds of fuel: reputation and cash. And I had one more exposure, the one that stung: my credibility. A nurse's word is the job. Chart it, sign it, stand behind it. If the word unstable ever attached itself to me, it would follow me into every room, every review board, every reference call, forever. My mother understood all of this, by the way. She'd wanted to be a nurse herself once, hold that thought, and she knew precisely where the profession keeps its soft spots. One evening in early June, I overheard her on the porch with Aunt Carol, her voice pitched to Carrie. "Night shifts, no husband, all alone in that apartment," she said. "I worry what that does to a mind." Carol hummed in sympathy. I stood in the kitchen with a dish towel in my hands and understood finally that my mother was telling a story about me, building it, brick by brick, in front of witnesses. I just didn't know yet what the story was for. The knock came on a Thursday at 11 at night. I'd worked 3 nights straight and was finally asleep, so it took me a minute to get to the door, and when I opened it, there were 2 police officers in my hallway, hands loose, faces careful. "Wellness check," the older one said. "Your mother reported you weren't answering your phone and had, quote, talked about ending things." The floor tilted. I had missed 2 calls from Mom, while sleeping, after night shifts, like a person. I had talked about ending things exactly once in my life, ending Sunday dinners early when Whitfield got going. I invited the officers in, because refusing looks bad, and I knew it. They saw a tidy apartment, a rinsed coffee mug, a nurse in scrub pants and a work badge on the counter. The older officer got quieter and more apologetic by the minute. "These calls come from a good place, ma'am," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Try to call your mom back." When they left, I sat on my kitchen floor and shook for a while, and then I called my mother, who answered on the first ring, at midnight, wide awake, and wept about how worried she'd been. "Thank God," she kept saying. "Thank God you're safe. Here's the trap, and I want you to feel the walls of it. Anyone can request a wellness check. There's no penalty for being wrong, no proof of what I'd supposedly said. It is worry-shaped, unfalsifiable, and it generates a police record with your address on it." The next morning at work, a day shift nurse caught my elbow. "Hey," she said, awkward. "Everything okay at home? Your mom called our unit desk yesterday, asking if you'd seemed stable lately. At work." She'd called my work. I drove to my mother's house the next afternoon, off shift, rehearsing calm the whole 15 minutes. She met me with chamomile tea and a trembling chin. I asked her, evenly, why she'd told police I wanted to end my life. Her eyes filled on cue. "I never said that. They must have misheard. You weren't answering, Megan. A mother imagines things." Then she cried, and I found myself, I swear to you, fetching her tissues, mid-confrontation, because 32 years of training doesn't switch off in a day. When she settled, she took a framed photo off the hutch, her at 25, in a student nurse's uniform, 1 semester from finishing. "I was good," she said quietly. "My instructor said I had the hands for it." She'd left school the day she found out she was carrying Jessica. Her own mother told her the decision had already been made, and nobody asked her a single question about what she wanted. For one strange minute we sat there, 2 nurses, one real and one erased, and I felt the ground soften. Then she set the photo down, patted my knee and said, "So I know what a woman's body is for, sweetheart. I paid that bill myself. You don't get to be the end of this family just because paying it scares you." There it was again. Same sentence, colder setting. I stood up, told her never to call my unit again, and walked out while she called after me that I was proving Dr. Whitfield's point. In my rearview mirror, as I pulled away, a silver sedan turned into her driveway. Whitfield's. He hadn't been due for any dinner. It was Tuesday. Here's the thing about nurses. When we get scared, we chart. That week, I booked a full physical with my own doctor and told her the truth. Family conflict, a wellness check I never needed, and a worry I felt ridiculous saying out loud, which was that someone might one day question my stability. Would she please document my presentation today? Mood, affect, all of it. She did, bless her, and didn't make me feel crazy for asking. Then I called Anne, the counselor I'd seen for 8 sessions after Dad died, and booked 2 more. I wasn't drowning. I wanted a licensed professional with recent clean notes saying Megan Kimball is grieving normally and functioning fine. A baseline. Evidence of health, banked in advance. If you take nothing else from my story, take that move. Then I made my mistake, and my mistake had a name. I told Jessica. We met for coffee and I laid out maybe half of it. The wellness check, the call to my unit, Whitfield's little dinner table exams. I watched my sister twist her wedding ring and fail to be surprised, and that should have told me plenty. Then Jessica said, "Would it kill you to just consider it? The surrogacy? You'd be giving Mom a reason to live." I said a reason to live shouldn't require my body. She flinched like I'd slapped her, and then she said the thing she wasn't supposed to say. Mom already asked Dr. Whitfield whether stress medication would interfere with an egg retrieval. I set my cup down. Retrieval. Not surrogacy. Retrieval. Eggs. Mine. There was a version of this plan I hadn't even been shown yet, and my sister knew the details of it. "Whose retrieval, Jess?" She looked at her ring and didn't answer. 2 Sundays later, I walked into what I thought was dinner, and what was actually an ambush with a casserole. Mom. Aunt Carol. Dr. Whitfield, seated this time at the head of the table, a yellow legal pad beside his plate. "Just an informal family conversation," Mom said, "about your well-being." What followed was not a conversation. Whitfield asked whether I knew what day it was. He asked whether I'd been having trouble at work, leaning warmly on the word trouble. He asked whether I sometimes felt the family was against me, And when I said the family was currently 3-1 at a dinner table, he wrote that down. That's when the room snapped into focus, because I have sat in on more mental status exams than that man had eaten potlucks. Orientation, mood, paranoid ideation. He was running one on me, badly, between the salad and the ham, in front of witnesses he'd handpicked. I stood, thanked my mother for dinner, some scripts run deep, and left with Aunt Carol calling after me that walking out was exactly the kind of behavior everyone was worried about. Which is the beauty of the trap, isn't it? Stay, and you're cooperating with an evaluation. Leave, and you're volatile. I sat in my car in the driveway and wrote every question in my journal with my hands shaking, and let me stop right here and ask you something. If you have ever sat at a family table and slowly realized the conversation was about you but not for you, I want to hear about it in the comments, truly, because it took me weeks to trust what I'd seen. And if you're new here, subscribe now, because what my mother turned that dinner into, on paper, is the reason this story ends in a courtroom. A week later, an envelope with no return address arrived at my hospital's HR office. HR called me in on a Wednesday. The letter was typed, unsigned, and it identified itself as coming from a concerned family member. It said I had been erratic since my father's death. It said I was grieving badly, isolating, and, this word was underlined, self-medicating. It suggested, with syrupy regret, that Riverside look into whether I was safe around patients. I read it twice with my hands flat on the table so they wouldn't shake, and I noticed something on the second pass. The letter described me as someone who tends to hide grief in busyness. Hide grief in busyness. I had heard that exact phrase, in that exact order, over a pot roast, from a semi-retired psychiatrist explaining me to my own mother. My nurse manager Bethany, God bless her flinty soul, told HR she'd take my drug test results over an anonymous letter any day of the week. I tested clean that afternoon, voluntarily, and HR marked the complaint unsubstantiated, no action. But here's what no one tells you about anonymous letters. They don't leave. A copy went into a file with my name on it, where it would sit, patient as a seed, waiting for the next complaint to make it look like a pattern. There was no way to prove who sent it. There never is. That's the whole point of anonymous. That weekend I did 3 things. I photocopied my journal and put the copy in a bank safe deposit box. I changed the locks on my apartment. My mother had held a key to my door since the day I moved in, and I skipped Sunday dinner for the first time in 2 years. Mom left a voicemail that was pure honey, saying she'd saved me a plate. I saved the voicemail. In September, I texted Mom that I'd come by Wednesday afternoon for Dad's toolbox while she was at her church committee meeting. She replied with a heart. I still had her key. She'd never asked for it back, and honestly, being the daughter with the key was the last piece of the old job I hadn't put down. The house smelled like lemon polish and stopped time. The toolbox was in the hall closet where Dad left it. I needed scissors for the label I wanted to tape on, and Mom keeps scissors in the junk drawer by the stove, and that is the entire, stupid, ordinary reason I found it. Under the coupon organizer sat a manila folder, squared to the corner of the drawer. Typed on the tab, Kimball, Megan A. My hands knew before I did. They went steady, the way they do when a delivery goes wrong. Inside, on Dr. Raymond Whitfield's letterhead, were session notes. 3 sessions. Dated in June, July, August. Locations listed as home visit. Sessions I had never had. In rooms I had never sat in. Describing a woman I have never been. Tearful, hostile, tangential. Preliminary impressions. Adjustment disorder with disturbance of conduct. Rule out delusional disorder. And then, in the assessment line, the sentence that rearranged my life. Family reports escalating hostility. Patient may pose risk to self. Recommend evaluation for guardianship of person. The last page carried a note in his cramped hand. Prepared at family request for court review. I photographed every page twice, front and back, checked the timestamps, put the folder back under the coupons squared exactly to the corner, returned the scissors, took the toolbox, locked the door, and walked to my car on the legs of a night shift nurse. Straight. Even. unhurried. Then I sat behind the wheel and looked at my own name on a stranger's diagnosis until the streetlights came on. Dana Pruitt's office was a converted house near the courthouse, with a receptionist named Phil and coffee like roofing tar. Dana was 54, gray bob, reading glasses on a chain, and she went through my photographs without a single change of expression. Then she took her glasses off. "Guardianship," she said. "Here's the machine they're building. Someone petitions the probate court claiming you're incompetent. They attach an expert evaluation. That's your friend Whitfield's homework you found. The court appoints an investigator, orders an independent evaluation, holds a hearing. If they win, a guardian controls where you live and what medical care you consent to." I asked the question, burning a hole in me. Could a court actually make me carry my sister's child? Dana actually laughed. "No. No court in this country can order you to be pregnant. Even a guardian couldn't consent to that. A judge would come out of his chair. Whatever your mother imagines she's buying here, that product does not exist." Then she leaned forward, and the comfort went out of her voice. "That is not the danger, so hear me. The danger is the process. A guardianship petition is public record. Your board of nursing renewal, your employer, your mortgage lender. A fight like this bleeds a nurse's license, a nurse's savings, and a nurse's name, win or lose. For some families, the process is the punishment. I've watched people surrender just to make it stop." Her advice was the hardest prescription I've ever filled. Do nothing loud. Don't confront. Don't post. Don't accuse. An accusation with no case yet would land as paranoid daughter attacks grieving widow, which was the exact story already written about me. Gather. Wait. Let them commit. I wrote Dana a retainer check for $5,000 out of the house fund, and the maple tree got a little further away. I want to tell you, I fortressed up and trusted no one. But I had one person left I was still trying to save, and I loved her. So I made the human mistake. I told Jessica. Not everything. Dana had rationed me. I told her there was a file with my name on it, that Whitfield had written things that never happened, and that she should be careful what she signed or said around Mom. I asked her to keep it between us. She held my hand across her kitchen table and promised. 3 days later, my mother texted me. "Dr. Whitfield says people who feel persecuted often fixate on documents. Praying for you." Fixate on documents. I had used almost those words with exactly one living soul. The floor didn't drop. It just quietly relocated. I drove to Jessica's and asked her straight, and my sister cried harder than I did. "She's our mother, Megan. She's not building a case. She's building a bridge. She just wants to help you get better, and you're acting like she's a criminal. And honestly, the way you're talking lately scares me." I looked at my big sister. 35 years old, 4 years of needles and losses, $38,000 of guilt riding on her body, a woman who checked with Mom before answering questions about her own uterus, and my anger just sat down. You don't get angry at a hostage for reading this statement. I told her I loved her. I went home, took out my journal, and wrote the saddest line in the whole notebook. Assume anything Jessica knows, Mom knows, by morning. From that night on, I was alone in my own family, which, I'd learn later, was itself about to go in a file, as evidence of isolating behavior. In October, I skipped my mother's 61st birthday dinner. I sent flowers and a card, and I worked instead, because a unit full of laboring mothers was the safest place I knew. At 9:40 that night, my charge nurse found me in the med room. Security was at the desk, she said, careful as glass, with a mobile crisis team. For me. Someone had called the county crisis line claiming to be family, reporting that I had threatened to hurt myself and had access to medications at work. Do you understand what that sentence does inside a hospital? Nurse. Threat. Access to medications. There is no version where they wave it off, no matter how steady I looked. And I get it. I'd have escalated it too. So I handed my badge to my charge nurse and walked off my own unit between a security guard and 2 crisis workers, down the main corridor, past the visitors' elevators, past a tech I'd trained and 2 patients' husbands, to the ER of my own hospital. The evaluation took 3 hours. The psychiatrist on call asked her questions. I answered like the colleague I was. And her conclusion was short and bulletproof. No suicidal ideation, no plan, does not meet criteria for any hold. Released. My mother likes to say that report proves the system works. What the report couldn't undo, everyone saw. By morning, the whole floor knew, and by policy, reasonable policy, written by reasonable people, I was placed on paid administrative leave, pending a fitness for duty review. The last document in the ER paperwork listed the referral source, not anonymous, this time. Reported by family physician acquaintance. A doctor had personally called a crisis line about a nurse he had never examined. Whitfield wasn't consulting on the story anymore. He'd stepped into it. And 9 days later, so did the county probate court. The envelope was certified, return receipt requested, and the clerk at my door needed a signature, which is the state's way of making sure you personally receive your own earthquake. Inside, notice that Patricia Ann Kimball had petitioned the probate court to be appointed guardian of the person of Megan Ann Kimball, an allegedly incompetent adult. Attached, a statement of expert evaluation, signed in blue ink, Raymond Whitfield, M.D. The same 3 phantom sessions from the kitchen drawer, now wearing a case number. There is a special stillness that comes over you when a thing you photographed in secret gets served to you by the government. My mother was formally asking a judge for the right to make my medical decisions, to decide where I lived. She had sworn, under penalty of perjury, that her daughter could not manage her own affairs. And the daughter in question was, that same week, cleared by an ER psychiatrist and holding a spotless 6-year employment record, currently interrupted by a leave that her own phone calls had caused. Public docket 2. Anyone at the courthouse, anyone from the board of nursing, any neighbor with a lunch break could pull it and read what my mother thought I was. I sat with all that for 1 long, cold hour. Then I drove to Dana's office, and I watched a 54-year-old probate attorney read the petition, smile very slightly for the first time in our acquaintance, and set it down like a winning hand. "Good," she said. I asked her what could possibly be good. "They've left the dinner table," Dana said. "They've stepped into my building. Courts run on paper, Megan. It's the one place in the world where paper has to be true, and their paper is fake." For the first time in months, I slept 8 hours. Aunt Carol came to my apartment uninvited the following week, carrying a lasagna like a flag of truce. She set it on my counter, took both my hands, and delivered the message she'd been sent with. "Your mother will drop everything, sweetheart. Everything. The lawyers, the doctors, all this ugliness. Gone. The day you help your sister. That's all this has ever been. She's doing it because she loves you. And someday, when you're holding that baby, you'll understand." And there it was, out loud at last. The quid pro quo with a lasagna garnish. The petition wasn't a belief that I was sick. It was a lever. Withdraw for womb. My mother had sworn to a court that I was incompetent, while simultaneously offering to unswear it in exchange for 9 months of my body, which, if you think about it for even a second, is a confession with cheese on top. I didn't argue with Carol. I'd finally learned which conversations are load-bearing and which are just noise. I asked her exactly one question. Does Jessica know her embryos are being used as a bargaining chip? Carol opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the lasagna, and in that silence I heard something I should have heard 4 years earlier, through every cycle, every miscarriage, every appointment my mother booked before the bleeding stopped. Jessica had never once been the author of this plan, not the IVF marathon, not the money, maybe not even the wedding year timeline. My sister wasn't the volunteer, she was the first draft. Before I tell you what the court did with my mother's paperwork, let me say this. If a relative has ever wrapped a demand in the word worry and handed it to you like a gift, tell me your version in the comments. I read every one of them. Night shift leaves you time. And subscribe if you haven't, because the certified letter was only my mother's opening bid. Aunt Carol left with her answer, which was no answer. I ate none of the lasagna. Some meals are exhibits, and by then, so help me, I had learned to think in exhibits. Then the court's own machinery woke up, and I discovered something nobody tells you. Due process, which had felt like a trap when it was aimed at me, is a beautiful thing when it starts asking questions in both directions. The court appointed an investigator, a brisk woman named Ms. Alvarez with a county badge and a clipboard, whose whole job was to see for herself. She came to my apartment on a Tuesday. She saw a nurse on administrative leave with her bills paid, alphabetized, and current. She saw a medication cabinet containing ibuprofen, a multivitamin, and allergy tablets. She asked how I spent my days. I showed her my fitness for duty paperwork, my counselor's letter, my baseline physical. She asked who held a key to my home. My mother did, I said. I changed the locks. Alvarez wrote that down with what I could have sworn was a flicker of respect. Meanwhile, the court ordered its own independent evaluation of me. Standard procedure, Dana said. And exactly what we wanted, because every neutral eyeball on this case belonged to us. And Dana went hunting. She subpoenaed Whitfield's complete records for his so-called patient Megan A. Kimball, appointment logs, billing entries, intake forms, consent to treatment. She requested my hospital time cards and staffing logs for June through August, the months of my 3 phantom home visits. Fraud is easy at a dinner table, she told me, stapling something with unnecessary force. It's very hard in discovery. Real treatment leaves a paper trail a mile wide. Fake treatment leaves 3 typed pages and a prayer. I remember nodding along, professionally calm. And I remember the other feeling too underneath, one I wasn't proud of. Some sliver of me still hoping my mother would call it all off before the machine we'd both summoned finished the job. The independent evaluation happened in a beige office with a white noise machine and a psychologist the court had picked, a Dr. Sorensen, who had never met my mother, my church, or my casserole-based reputation. 2.5 hours. I answered the way I hand off a patient at 7 a.m. Events, dates, documents, no adjectives. When she asked about my father, I cried a normal amount, which, and I say this as a professional, is allowed. When she asked why I thought my family had filed this petition, I did not say the word plot, or campaign, or conspiracy. I said, I declined to carry a pregnancy for my sister, and my mother believes the refusal itself is a symptom. Sorensen looked at me for a long moment over her glasses. She asked about my work history, my finances, my friendships, my sleep. She ran the standard instruments, and I recognized every single one, and I let her run them without narrating, which cost me more effort than the tests themselves. I walked out with no idea how it had gone. Evaluators are trained to give you nothing, and she was excellent at giving me nothing. Except once. At the very end, with her hand already on the door, she glanced at the copy of Whitfield's evaluation in my file and asked one question that wasn't on any form. Ms. Kimball, who diagnosed your grief as a disorder? And when, exactly, did he examine you? I said that was a very good question. She said, in a way I have replayed approximately 400 times since, and held the door, and told me I'd hear from the court. The subpoenaed records came back in November, and Dana called me in with a voice I hadn't heard her use before. Whitfield had produced his file. He had to. And his file was the confession he'd never have spoken. No intake form, no consent to treatment, no billing entries, because you can't bill for a patient who doesn't exist. Just the 3 session notes, typed, and here was the wonder of it. One was dated June 14th, a home visit at 4 in the afternoon, during which I had allegedly been tearful and tangential in my apartment. On June 14th, I badged into Riverside at 6:52 in the morning and badged out at 9:19 at night. 14 hours in the middle of a staffing crunch, with my name on the OR log for an emergency C-section at 3:40 in the afternoon. I wasn't tearful in my apartment. I was gowned and gloved 20 minutes away, holding a retractor. Hospital time cards are business records, Dana said, grinning like a wolf. Judges eat them with a spoon. That same week, at 2 in the morning, my doorbell rang, and it was Jessica, mascara gone, holding a canvas tote bag full of paper. Her own IVF records. She'd requested them herself. First thing, she said, that she'd done alone in 4 years. We spread them on my kitchen table and she showed me Mom's handwriting in the margins of her cycle calendars. Mom listed as support person on form after form. Mom's initials next to Jessica's signature on consents. Session after session. Year after year. And the patient portal login, Jessica said quietly, had always lived in Mom's phone. I used to think I chose all of it, my sister said, flattening a crumpled consent with the side of her hand. But Megan, she was in the room before I ever said yes. She looked up at me. Put me on the witness list. Dana told me not to go. I went anyway. One last time, off the record. A daughter and not a respondent. Because some stubborn cell in me still believed there was a version of this where I managed us both back from the edge. My mother made tea nobody drank, and for half an hour, under the yellow kitchen light, she showed me the inside of the machine that built her. Her mother, my grandmother, once made her kneel on the kitchen floor and apologized to my grandfather for, quote, letting him wait for a grandson. 2 granddaughters in, and still no boy to carry the name. She was 25 when the nursing school dream ended. The family had voted, and she hadn't been in the room for the vote. I buried a husband, she said, steady and terrible, with no grandchild to hold at the funeral. You have your license, your patience, your little house fund. I had this family. It is the only thing I have ever been allowed to build, Megan. If there are no children, what was any of it for? And I felt it, I won't lie to you. Grief for the student nurse in that photograph, and for the grown woman kneeling on her own mother's linoleum. You can see the whole chain and still be shackled to it. Then she reached into the sideboard drawer and hope did its last stupid lap around my chest, and she laid a form on the table, filled out in her handwriting. My name, my date of birth, a fertility clinic letterhead, consultation for voluntary egg retrieval. Sign it, she said, and Monday morning, all this court unpleasantness never happened. You don't get to be the end of this family. I looked at the pen she'd set beside it, her good pen, the one she signs church checks with. I left both on the table. There's a moment in every bad delivery where the debate ends. You stop hoping the strip will improve, you call it, and the room changes speed. Driving home from my mother's kitchen, I called it. Because here's what that pre-filled form actually taught me. This was never going to stop at me. A doctor who will invent one patient will invent another. A mother who found this lever once would keep it oiled forever. For Jessica, for some future niece, for the next daughter in this family who said no to anything. So on a gray Tuesday in late November, I did the one thing in this story I could never take back. I sat at my kitchen table and filed a formal complaint with the State Medical Board against Raymond Whitfield, MD, fabrication of clinical records for a person with whom he had no physician-patient relationship, and participation in a coercive family scheme, with my photographs, the served petition, and the June 14th time card attached as exhibits. I read it twice, the way I read a med label. Then I pressed submit, and the state took possession of it. And no apology at any future Thanksgiving could ever unring that bell. It took roughly a day to reach the church. Aunt Carol's voicemail called me a traitor who was killing her own mother. 2 flower committee ladies unfriended me in a coordinated strike. Sunday came, and for the first time in my adult life, there was no plate saved for me anywhere on earth, and my phone rang at 9 in the evening, Mom's ringtone, the one I'd answered on the second ring for 2 straight years. I sat in my one good porch chair and let it ring all the way out. I fixed nothing, for no one. It rang like a fire alarm in another woman's house. 8 days before the hearing, my mother's attorney sent Dana a proposal with a bow on it. Call it what it was, an exit ramp, paved and lit. Patricia would withdraw the guardianship petition with prejudice. The family would request the file be sealed. Each side bears its own costs. Everyone signs a mutual non-disparagement clause, and the whole ugly year gets folded up like a tablecloth. The price sat in Clause 4, in polite little type. Megan withdraws her medical board complaint against Dr. Whitfield. And Clause 5, the one that told me whose pen had really drafted this. Megan agrees to attend family mediation, including informational only, no obligation, A session on fertility options. Even here. Even now. Even in a legal surrender, she'd tucked a brochure into the fine print. Dana walked me through it like the professional she is. I have to tell you the lawyer's truth. This is a clean exit. Petition gone, record sealed. Your license renewal goes through without a single asterisk, and you stop hemorrhaging money this Friday. You've spent $9,000 of a house on this fight already. I have watched good, brave people take far worse deals, and I've never once judged them for it. Then she took her glasses off. And the other truth? I asked. The complaint is the only part of this that protects anyone who isn't you, Dana said. Seal the file and Whitfield keeps his license, and the next family he helps won't have a nurse in it. I asked for 48 hours. She gave me the weekend. I want to be honest with you, because you've come this far with me. I nearly signed. That's the truth. The maple tree, the quiet, my name never again in a public docket. I nearly signed. That weekend, my fitness for duty review finally cleared. Unfit for nothing, fit for everything, effective immediately. And the hospital, short-staffed as always, asked if I'd take a Saturday night. I took it like a drowning woman takes air. Around 2 in the morning, I had a patient in room 4. 19 years old, first baby, doing beautifully. Her mother was also in room 4, and her mother was a storm front, overriding the birth plan, answering questions addressed to her daughter, announcing to the resident that we wanted interventions the patient had already declined, twice, in writing. Textbook. I've seen 100 of her. Between contractions, my patient caught my sleeve and whispered the whole story in one look. So I did the thing my license exists for. I planted myself between the bed and the storm, and I said, "Pleasant as Sunday. Ma'am, in this room, only the patient makes decisions. Only she decides who stays, and she'd like you to step out to the waiting area." The mother informed me her daughter didn't know what she wanted. "She does," I said. "She said it. My job is to make it stick." Security walked her to the family lounge, gently. My girl squeezed my hand off. And at 5:55 that morning, she delivered a furious, perfect daughter into a room that held, by her own choice, exactly the people she wanted in it. I stood at the sink afterward, longer than I needed to. Monday morning, I called Dana before my coffee finished brewing. "Tell them no deal," I said. "All of it goes on the record." Dana was quiet for a second. Then she said, "There she is." Dana made me say the price out loud before she'd send the rejection, because she's that kind of lawyer. So I said it. Refusing the deal meant a public hearing on my sanity, in the county where I work, with my mother across the aisle. It meant the board complaint stayed live, which meant Whitfield would fight, which meant the church would pick sides, and the church had already picked. It meant that whatever thin, injured thing still ran between my mother and me would not survive contact with a courtroom, that I was trading the last of her for the whole of me, and it meant spending more of the maple tree. I said all of it, and then I told her why, and I'll tell you exactly what I told her. I wasn't doing this to punish my mother. Punishment is her language. I've spent 32 years getting fluent in a different one. I was doing it because I kept thinking about the next woman, some future daughter in some other kitchen, looking down at a diagnosis she never sat for. The only reason this scheme cracked was dumb luck in a junk drawer, plus a nurse who knows what a real chart looks like. The next one might not know a chart from a casserole. "The file stays open," I said. "The complaint stays filed. We finish it." Dana sent the rejection at 9:04 on a Monday morning, and my mother's answer came back through her lawyer within the hour, and her answer was, "See you at the hearing." Fine, I thought, and there was iron in it and a funeral in it too. See me. For once, all of you. See me. The probate courtroom was smaller than television promises. Blonde oak, a wheezing radiator, Judge Harmon presiding with the patience of a man who has heard every family in the county lie about love. My mother wore her funeral dress. Behind her, Aunt Carol and 2 ladies from the flower committee. Behind me, Bethany, my nurse manager, on her day off, arms crossed like a bouncer. The county went first, in effect. Ms. Alvarez, the investigator, read her report into the record. Home visit unremarkable. Finances managed independently. Employment in good standing. Respondent cooperative. Then Dr. Sorensen's independent evaluation entered as the court's exhibit. No evidence of delusional disorder. No impairment of capacity. Grief consistent with normal bereavement. Judge Harmon read that one twice. I watched him. Then Whitfield took the stand and Dana stood up. And I finally understood why people fear quiet women with subpoenas. She walked him gently through his own 3-session notes. Dates, locations, his signature. Then she handed him my June 14th time card and the OR log with my name on it and asked him to read the badge-out time aloud. 9:19 at night. She asked how the respondent had managed to be tearful in her apartment at 4 in the afternoon while scrubbed into an emergency C-section across town. Silence. She asked where his intake form was, his consent to treatment, his billing. Silence. Shuffling. A sip of water. And then the question the whole year had been marching toward, asked in a voice so level it could have hung a picture. Doctor, on what date did you last examine the respondent? Whitfield looked at my mother. It was quick, half a second, but the whole room saw the look, and the look said whose patient he'd really been all along. I observed her, he said finally, in family settings. Judge Harmon put down his pen. Then Dana called Jessica Sutton, and my mother's head turned like something on a hinge. Her attorney had held the witness list for days. Watching her face, I understood she simply hadn't believed it. Jessica walked past our mother's pew without looking down and swore in with a voice that shook exactly twice and then leveled. Dana asked about the 4 years, and my sister, who checks with Mom before answering questions about her own body, answered every single one alone. Who chose her fertility clinic? Mom found it. Who scheduled the cycles? Mom kept the calendar. The appointments came as invitations. Whose phone held the patient portal login for the past 4 years? My mother's. Who was in the room every time she signed a consent? Quiet. Then. She was in the room before I ever said yes. She said it the way you finally pronounce a diagnosis you've been circling for years, and it landed on that courtroom like a dropped tray. Dana asked softly whether anyone had discussed using Jessica's remaining embryos in a surrogacy her sister had declined. Yes, it was offered to Megan as the price of ending this case. Nobody asked me at all. They're mine and Tyler's. And nobody asked me. And that is when my mother stood up. In the middle of a probate hearing, Patricia Kimball rose in her funeral dress and said, "Jessica Marie, you will not do this to your family." Judge Harmon's gavel came down once. Counsel would control their client, he said. Or the bailiff would. Mom sat, vibrating, while her attorney whispered fast and useless things, and I sat perfectly still across the aisle, hands folded, the calmest woman in the county, watching the two of us finally trade places in public. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was altitude. Somewhere very far below, the machine was coming apart. Then it was me, and I want to be honest about the temptation, because it was real, and it had my mother's face. On that stand, under oath, I could still have softened it. Said misunderstanding, said grief, everyone's grief, said we all lost Dad and lost our way. Managed it, one last time, in front of a judge, and left her dignity intact on the record. Half my life had trained for exactly that testimony, and I could feel the old reflex warming up like an engine. Instead, I told the truth. All of it, in order, in the flat voice I use for handoffs. The wellness check at 11 at night, and the call to my unit desk the next morning. The dinner table evaluation with the legal pad. The anonymous letter and its borrowed phrase. The crisis team walking me off my own floor past patients' families. The manila folder under the coupons. The judge examined my photographs against Whitfield's produced records, page by page, while the radiator ticked. And last, the form in my mother's handwriting. My name, egg retrieval consultation, sign it, and Monday morning, none of this ever happened. Her lawyer asked me on cross, with a little edge, whether I understood that my mother had acted out of love. And there it was. the last open door. One final chance to nod along. I understand she believes that, I said. I'm not here to end this family. I'm here to end what this family does to its daughters. Judge Harmon ruled within the hour. Petition dismissed with prejudice. The evaluation, he said, in words I will keep forever, was prepared in the absence of any physician-patient relationship and is entitled to no weight whatsoever. Referral of Dr. Whitfield's conduct to the appropriate authorities. Costs to the petitioner. The gavel came down for the second and last time, and the sound it made was very small and completely permanent. Nobody cheered, because that isn't what winning a family sounds like. The flower committee ladies steered Whitfield out a side door and away from questions. Aunt Carol wept into her scarf, aimlessly, like a sprinkler. And in the hallway outside the courtroom, under fluorescent light and a bulletin board of foreclosure notices, my mother stopped in front of me. Up close, she looked older than the morning. And still perfect. Hair set, lipstick exact. A woman built by an era that graded women on composure and grandchildren. She adjusted the strap of her handbag. Then she said, without heat, without tears, in the same tone she once used to tell me dinner was at 6. You are supposed to be how this family continues. One sentence. 32 years, appraised, filed, closed. And every trained cell in my body leaned toward the old work. Reach for her. Translate her. Soften the landing. Fix it, fix it, fix it. For the first time in my life, I let the moment go unmanaged. I didn't defend myself to her. I didn't apologize for her to anyone. I just stood there, still, and let it be exactly as sad as it actually was, all the way through, without turning it into a task. She waited a beat for the daughter who de-escalates. That daughter had retired an hour ago, on the record. So my mother walked past me, through me, heels precise on the terrazzo, funeral dress and perfect posture, out the courthouse doors and back to the version of the family that lived only in her head now. Warm fingers threaded through the crook of my elbow. Jessica. Come on, my sister said, thick-voiced, steadier than I'd ever heard her. I'll drive. We walked out together, and the December air hit like clean water, and I let it. A year out, here's the honest ledger. The medical board moved faster than I expected. Boards do, when the time cards do their arguing for them. Whitfield signed a consent agreement in the spring and surrendered his license. No trial, no headlines, just a quiet line in a public database that means no daughter in this county will ever star in his filing cabinet again. My administrative leave was retroactively wiped to nothing. My renewal went through clean. Bethany put me in for a charge nurse slot and I said yes. The fight cost me $12,000 of the house fund, so I bought a smaller house than the one I'd circled. No maple tree, but a stubborn old lilac, one porch, one good chair. The first night I slept with the windows open just because every key to that place was mine. My mother has not changed, and I need you to hear that, because stories where the mother changes are lullabies. She's still at church. Front pew. To the flower committee she is the broken-hearted widow whose ungrateful daughters dragged her through a courtroom, and honestly, that version of her will outlive us all. At Christmas she sent me a card, cream-colored beautiful penmanship, praying for you, Mom. No apology, no mention of any courtroom, as if the year had been weather. I read it twice, put it in the box with the journal and the copies, and closed the lid. You can love someone from behind a boundary. Some weeks that's the whole assignment. Jessica is the part I'd tell you about first if we were talking on a porch. She and Tyler found a therapist, and then a better one, and did the unglamorous work. She changed her patient portal password in the parking lot of the courthouse that same afternoon. And when the clinic's annual storage invoice came for the 2 embryos, she and Tyler sat at their own kitchen table, alone, and decided, not this way. Not as anyone's lever. They chose adoption, at their own speed, on their own paper. The day their home study was approved. My phone rang before the caseworker's car left the driveway, and my sister was laughing and crying, and neither of us managed a full sentence for a minute or two. This spring they brought home a son. He has a startled laugh, and no idea, none, that he was ever anything but wanted. And when Jessica asked me to be his godmother, she asked me. Me, just her, no committee, no one else in the room. I said yes on my own behalf, which it turns out is the only way I say anything anymore. Sunday dinners happen at my little house now, some Sundays, when shifts allow. Pot roast, occasionally. Nobody counts anybody's embryos over the green beans. The baby yells at the ceiling fan like it owes him money. There's an empty chair, and we don't pretend there isn't. The family didn't survive intact. The people in it survived. The ones who wanted to be people more than they wanted to be links in a chain. That was always the trade my mother refused to see. She never did get her continuation. She got something she has no shelf for. 2 daughters who ended what she started. If you keep one line from all this, keep the one I finally learned at 32. A family isn't continued by the daughters it uses. It's continued by the first daughter who refuses to be used, because she's the one who makes love safe for whoever comes next. That's my story. One fake file, one courtroom, one sister who finally said yes on her own terms, to her own life. If this reminded you that no is a complete sentence, even to your mother, take that as your sign today, and if a file somewhere has your name on it, ask for a copy. Paper only wins in the dark. Share this with someone who needs it. Drop a comment and tell me what you would have done at that kitchen table. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.